Okay, when you're checking the cylinder heads out, you need to know the valve stem protrusion, which is just a measurement from the spring pad to the tip of the valve. These are, this exhaust side is 2020, and the spec should be 1.980 to 2.04 on both the intake and exhaust. So that's 2020 for that exhaust valve. And this intake, we're about 2010 on the intake. Now, what's going to affect this is if the valve seats are worn, and I'll show you in a minute because these valve seats are worn, especially on the exhaust, width of the valve seat, and the valve is worn too. That's going to affect it. Now, what happens if you have, why it matters is where your rocker arm rides, tip of the rocker arm where it rides on the valve. As a general rule of thumb, about halfway through the valve lift, so just say it's 500 lift, so about 250 valve lift, you want the rocker arm to be riding directly in the center of the valve, that half of valve lift, as a general rule of thumb. Now, what's going to change if you're using high lift cams, it's going to change that. And then you get into changing valve stem lengths on the valves there. Let me show you these seats. Now, if they're sunk too far in, same thing. You know, if you go to oversized valves, let's just say you're putting oversized valves in there, and you don't have the protrusion right. Well, valves are more likely to hit each other or hit the piston. So of course you want that to be right on. Let me see if I can get you to show how these valves and seats are worn on this thing. I don't know how well you'll be able to see how worn that seat is there. You're looking at the 45 here. I don't know if you can see how wide that thing is. It's pretty wide. As a general rule of thumb, or we'll just say that's where I like them to be at. So we're at about 125,000 stick, or basically about twice what it needs to be right here. This thing, you would end up having to cut the valve seat, and this valve is pretty toasty too. Now, if you can see, it's actually concave down in the surface there. So by the time you cut a new valve, put a new valve in there, and cut the seat, you might still be under spec, so that might be usable. If you cut it and you put a new valve in there and the valve stem protrusion's over, say 2040, 2050, that's a little stout. Unless you're using a higher lift cam, you get away with it. But that's about it. Now this intake side ain't quite as bad. You can see that it still needs to be cut, but or ground, whichever one you're doing. And it's right at, what did I say, 2 inches, 2010, 2010, I think. So that one's a lot more easily. Now, on these, what you usually end up doing is I would replace the seats in them if I needed to. Actually, I'd do a valve job first and see where the valve stem protrusion's at. And then if it's so far sunk down in the head, I could put a seat in it, or sometimes you can just grind the valve tip a little bit and valve grinder. stick it in there and grind it down slightly. If you're talking, 10 thousandths, 20 thousandths, whatever, it's not a big deal. But that's pretty much it for the stem protrusions. You want to check your rocker arms. Put the rocker box back on there and check it. Put your rocker box back on there and adjust your push rods and check the tip here. See where your rocker arm's sitting at half valve lift. You don't really want it going off the edge of the valve too much, because what ends up happening is actually pushes side loads the valve, so it wears the guide out quicker. The stem protrusion important. And really, that's about all I got. I just thought I'd do a short video here on that. You want to check out your valve guide wear. Already done that in another video. And this is going to affect your spring tension too. If your valve stem protrusion, if it's higher, you're probably going to need to shim the valve springs, and they're not going to want to. You're going to need to shim the valve springs. But that's all I got. You guys take care. Have a great day.